Welcome back to Leadership Trademarked. In our last episode, we began an important and honest conversation about relationships, how they ground us as leaders, and how they help us navigate what can often feel like the isolation and weight of leadership. We talked about the reality that leadership, while visible on the outside, can feel very lonely on the inside. And that is relationships that brings us back to connection, perspective, and purpose. Today, we continue that conversation, but we will go deeper because relationships don't stand still. They evolve, they stretch, they get tested, and we are not intentional. They can also drift. So, in this episode, we are focusing on something fundamental, how relationships evolve over time and what it actually takes to sustain them. We will explore three anchors that shape every meaningful relationship in leadership and in life. That is self-awareness, communication, and purpose, our why, the reason we invest in relationship in the first place. And purpose, or our why, the reason we invest in relationship in the first place. Because strong relationships don't happen by accident. They are built and rebuilt through awareness, intention, and clarity of purpose. So I invite my friends today, Rosalind and Leslie, to help discuss when we think about our relationship journey, how have your relationship changed over time? So, what kind of preparation have you done for today? Are you sharing particular stories?
I was hoping that I would get some more ideas. I did do some preparation because I have actually changed a lot. For one thing, I came from an environment that was much more, well, I would call it assertive. I remember when I first moved here, a couple of people actually called me aggressive, which surprised me because I never thought of myself as aggressive. But I do think that I had at one time, I was more focused on proving myself. I've definitely become more collaborative.
Mm.
And so my working with style, my leadership style, all of those things have changed. I mean, I was probably, as a young manager or young leader, I was probably more protective of the people that worked for me. And instead of looking at it as having their back, I probably tried to shield them.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, I stopped the shielding because part of that learning experience is actually finding out what happens in certain situations. So then I just kind of moved behind them and shielded them. And
Mhm.
not shielded them, picked them up and dusted them off and said, okay, we can figure this out together, sort of approach. And I did some things as a young person, like a new employee, that I'm not proud of. And I actually set up a couple of people to take some pretty big falls because I thought they were sleazy. So my response was to be more sleazy.
You're smart. Like I can outsmart you.
Whereas I wouldn't do things like that anymore today. I would
Yeah.
confront the person and I would tell them, when you do this, this is the impact.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't lead them down a trail of crumbs and trap them with their own
Mhm.
misbehavior. So that was what I've been thinking about. And then I was just thinking about too how, as human beings, we are amazing in terms of our adaptability and our ability to grow. We've been given 70, 80, 90 years. It's different for everybody, but we certainly don't stay still over all those decades, right? We're constantly changing and reimagining and redefining ourselves. And so all of that changes our relationships and how we approach different things. And I was thinking of, I don't know if you have remember a television program or a movie that you really enjoyed, maybe when you were a kid, and then years later you see it again and you think, oh, that did not age well. And then it reminded me of the Aunt Jemima label. Do you remember the Aunt
Yes,
Jemima
yes,
label? It was
yes, yes,
syrup and pancake mix.
yes.
And that went back into the
Yeah,
1800s. And in fact, at one time, it was lauded as one of the first trademark images and,
yeah,
all of
yeah.
this marketing and stuff. And then in 19, I think it was 2021, Pillsbury said, yeah, this is not good. We can't do this anymore. So those have been sort of the kinds of things that I've been
Yeah.
thinking of just from a bunch of different
Yeah,
angles and
yeah.
how we do evolve. We change.
We do change, and I think a couple of things that you said I want to come back to, but what I have been thinking throughout preparing for this was how relationships do need work. So they need consistency. It's the ongoing nourishment of that relationship for it to grow and actually become it, right?
Yeah,
And I think that's important, consistency and reaching out to people and saying hello and what's happening. And I think relationships do need that. They don't
yeah,
just happen. I think you need to build it and then you need to nourish it to continue to grow. And then there's relationships that, like, I have friends back home, for example. I don't see them, we don't talk a couple of years, and then I'll be home, okay, and then we just pick up where we left off, like
right
nothing
where you left
happened. You
off. I
just kind of
love
go
that.
right
Yeah,
in. But you already had that relationship built. You already had the connection. You already had the trust. And you're just so excited to just continue to catching up and find out how they're doing and so forth. And then just continue, right, from
yeah,
there. But the relationship is there. So it made me think a lot about relationships over time and the meaningful relationship I've been lucky to have. I know a lot of us do, but there are only few, right? If you think about it, and if you step back and you say how many relationships, like true relationships, you have, you can probably count them on one hand. The
okay,
people that you like your 911. Who is your 911? You may have a whole bunch of people that you know and you interact and you socialize and you dance or whatever you do. I run with them, but there's only a handful of people that you really can say, okay, that's my family, that's my home, right? And it doesn't have to be your family, like blood family or whatever, but these are the people that you now call your family, right?
So, Sylvia, you just hit the nail on the head. There are only, research proves this, so I can find this stuff about it, but there are only 5 relationships in your life that you need to pay attention to. Now, I'm not saying that means that all these other people don't need to have your attention and your guidance and your support. but there's only 5 people. And Leslie, to your point, and you were so powerful on that identity matrix, it's all about your shadow. Okay. So the shadow encourages us to connect in a way that follow the rules that get us accepted, yada, yada, yada. And it's a bunch of horseshit. Okay. The real success comes from understanding that you have an opportunity in your life, if you choose, to pick people who you can say what you mean what you say, and tell them all your nasty little secrets or worries. Okay. And they say, uh huh, wow, that is so cool that you told me that. Now, what would you like to do with it? And now we're right back to a relationship, which starts with an outcome frame, goes into a number of other programs, including the identity matrix, which I think is a big one. Also, the control, not control, which is probably the biggest one. And it allows an ongoing, authentic conversation to happen. So, my view is, as old as I am, when I think back on my life, and I didn't know any of this, it was a gut feeling. Okay. When I met you, Leslie, I knew you were going to be my boss, and I was going to make that happen, whether you liked it or not. Okay. And we did it.
Yep, we did.
Sylvia, when I met you, you told me you wanted to be this powerful guru that you are now. And I thought, this is a child in security, and she's dreaming in Technicolor. But I said, oh, so tell me about that. And you went on for an hour and a half. I said, okay, you got it. But there's things to do. And it happened. Now, that is the core of relationships. If I think back to my career in the bank, and I can't do it off the top of my head, but I can tell you there were 5 or 10 men and maybe a couple of women who could see me, could see the value I could bring, that were willing to back me. And that's all I needed to do me. And so I think this thing now that we're going to do in this podcast, if I'm getting it right, and if I'm wrong, tell me, is all about relating to the other, not the other
Mhm.
who looks like you, sounds like you, does what you said, but the other who has a personality, who has integrity or not integrity. And it's time now for us to start paying attention to that. I can say out loud that I didn't know about any of this. Okay. I had no idea about this stuff when I was growing up. But I had a father more than a mother who guided me, who talked about principles. And Sylvia, the first time that you and I went to the Cayman Islands and we had so much fun, you talked about your family
Yep.
growing up in a communist country and how your father would include everybody at the dinner table, doors closed, can't talk about it, and talk about principles. And as different as I am from you in a country that was different from you, I found that we had exactly the same principles.
Things
Stuff.
that Sylvia and I were talking before you joined us is just how over time things change. Have you ever gone back and looked at one of your favorite movies or one of your TV programs
Right,
that either
right,
made you smile or made you laugh and you're
right,
watching it and you're thinking, "Oh my, this did not age well. This is not how
right,
we think about these
right.
things." So, I think that right now we're at one of those really big turning points where there's lots of things that we don't accept anymore, that we aren't going to carry forward with us. And there's just so much, and nobody really has a vision as to what it's going to look like. And we're just kind
Right.
of caught in all of this turmoil. And there will be things that emerge.
Right.
There are going to be winners, there will be losers, people will get hurt, people will make a lot of money, like all of those things are going to happen. But in 10 or 15 years, we're going to look back and say, oh, wow,
Right.
that was a
Okay.
lot
So,
of
Leslie,
change.
to your point about that, which I agree with, it all boils down to who are you and what is your shadow? Because we all have one.
For this episode, we are focusing on self-awareness, communication, and the purpose of the why. So when you think about your relationship journey, how have your relationships changed over time?
Okay. Can I go first?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, my leadership journey was, in fact, not a vision. And as I worked through the various levels of what am I doing and what do I want and where am I going, I found that I didn't have the answers. But I was also aware that there were people I was working for, and I can remember their names and dates and everything about them, who I could go and have a conversation with about what I didn't know, but also about what my current state was that I did not enjoy or like or feel satisfied by. And every one of those people, from the time I was 19 to 77, are still in my life.
Yeah.
And as I went through the things I did, which is kind of beside the point, but I was on track, I would go back to them and say, okay, so I did this, and now what about that? And they would listen and they would say things. They didn't give me orders, but they listened to me. And I believed that they believed in me. I felt like I was accepted, that I could. And I took it a step at a time. Without those relationships to guide me, without those conversations, I could not have done anything I did. I might have done it, but I wouldn't have done it well. I don't think I could have got the jobs. Okay.
Yeah.
I had people who had my back, who knew me as a person within a system. They didn't look at me as a piece of the system. And we talked about morals and ethics and honesty and engaging and conflict and difficult relationships. We talked about all that. We talked about it. They didn't tell me what to do, they listened to me. And I went away from that and I made my own choices. And when I got in trouble, I called them back. I remember the day I called Fred back and he said, "Oh, it's you. I guess I have to cancel the next 2 hours. You want to talk?" And I said, "Yes." And it was that kind of bond. It was like calling somebody who had your back, like your best friend, like your sister, like your favorite parent. And they didn't tell me what to do. They listened and I figured it out. And then I took action and it built and it built and it built. And then, of course, I took all these amazing people and I introduced them to all my amazing people.
That's relationship. That's trust, right? That
Yeah.
really is trust.
But it's also more
Yeah.
than that. It's it's getting out of your shadow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's really saying what you mean and mean what you say
Yeah.
with somebody and knowing you won't lose them
Yeah.
and you won't get hurt.
Yeah.
You know, Roz, when you started this off, you said something and it triggered a memory in my brain. And the thing that you said that was so outstanding was you didn't have all the answers. And I thought, yes, that's how the communication piece changes because
Right.
early on, we all think that we have to prove ourselves, and we prove ourselves by having all the answers and by having all the best ideas. And then someday, one day, you're responsible for all these people, and suddenly you're standing in the middle of chaos, and you think, "Uh-oh, I actually don't have all the answers."
In fact,
So
I don't have any of them.
that's right. I have no idea how to do this. And so it's like a, a switch gets flipped, and all of a
Right.
sudden you realize your job now is to listen and to let other people
Right.
do what they know they
Right.
can do and how
Right.
they can do it and how they can own it
Yeah.
and the outcomes. And I think that's one of the big ways that relationships also change over time. I think over time, as we get smarter, we realize how little, in fact, we really know, and we start
Right.
listening more.
Right. And Leslie, to that point, that concept or that understanding relates to who
Mm-hmm.
you're married to, who you parent,
Yeah.
who's your brother, who's your sister, who's your friend, and where do you want to be? Hmm?
Mhm.
Because uh it's the only way to move forward. I mean, I look at myself and think, well, I think I know what I know and this and this and this. And then I think, but do I? And then I think how I take that to market, particularly with my kid, right? Well, he doesn't really know me. He knows me as a role. I am his mother and I raised him on principles. And I left a bunch of stuff out because that's the best I could do. So everybody I know right now is struggling with system change, the economy, what to do, who to marry, whether to have kids, what kind of job I want. And all the benchmarks are foggy. Everything has suddenly become a world that I did not grow up in. The world I grew up in was certainty. That if I could get my head around wanting to be an equestrian or a back bowl skier or a manager or a leader or an advisor or a coach, I could do it. Okay. I was certain of it. Now, I don't think the world was is any more organized then, or it's as disorganized then as it was now. But I knew what I could do, what I wanted to do, what I would do, and what I wouldn't do. And I pursued that, and I got my feedback from relationships, friends, bosses, my father, my sister, some learnings, teachings, some therapy. I mean, I pursued it. And I just see so many people right now that are without any of those guardrails or those advisors. And so here we are. So it
So
all goes back to
it
relationships.
all goes back to relationships. So is there a relationship that shaped you early in your career that still influences how you lead today? So
Leslie?
Yeah, Leslie?
Yes. Actually, my first boss when I moved to Canada was a guy by the name of Jim Tranter. He's unfortunately deceased many years ago, but I watched him and his relationship with everybody around him. He gave everybody his full attention. He was as attentive and as respectful of the person who served us our lunch in the restaurant as he was towards the head of the investment division. And that's how he treated everyone. He treated everybody with respect. He listened to everybody and he made everybody feel worthwhile and that they were making a contribution. And I remember thinking, he's not competing with anybody.
Yeah.
He's bringing everybody together, bringing them all to the table. And I think that really inspired me to also to start paying attention to what people had to say and what they had to offer. Um, I still remember that. I think that was probably had more impact on me and than any other manager I ever had.
Well,
I
you
had a
know,
really bad one, and also she also had a big impact, but I
yeah,
won't.
the other way.
Because sometimes you learn just as much from the really bad bosses
You
as you
do.
do from the really good ones.
Yeah, you do.
That reminds me of I was asked to take on a project for a huge district. I'm working in a bank to do a really big thing. Doesn't matter what it was. And I got picked, so I'm feeling pretty cocky, right? And I'm pretty young. So I get on with it, and what do you know? It's not working, right? It's not working. I'm not getting what they wanted me to do. So I go to the guy who's a district manager, which is a pretty powerful position, and I'm pretty junior. And I sat down with him and I said, Denny, it's not working. I'm not getting it done. And he said, oh, very relaxed. And he said, well, why isn't it working? And I said, well, I think I've done it all wrong. He said, well, that's good. So would you know what to do if you did it all right? And I said, yes. He said, okay, well, you go and do it right. And it worked. Okay. Because he listened to me. And of course, I was junior and young and I was in my, I don't know, 20s. But he didn't deny me the right to admit that I was feeling like I was letting the system or myself or him down. And he didn't punish me for it. He was curious about, oh, so you know what you did wrong. I said, yeah. He said, okay, go fix it. Well, that did more for me. And then we just turned the ship. He didn't have to tell me what to do. He only had to tell me that I could do it because I went into it thinking, well, I don't know how to do this. I'll fake it. I'll be in my shadow. Uh, Very powerful.
That's
How about you,
fascinating.
Sylvia? What was a relationship
Yeah.
that helped shape you early in your career?
So I have been thinking quite a bit about this one. I have had many, many mentors, sponsors, people that have supported me, that listened to me, that for many years from the time I came to Canada and starting in my career. But actually, what came to mind when I thought about the most influence that had on my career was actually my father.
Mm.
And it was about how I grew up and watching him. And it was about particularly the relationships that he had built. He was a trusted person. We've always had so many different people coming to our house, so we would host things or he would be invited to things. And thinking back, we lived in a very tiny little village in Romania. and the amount of people we had coming through our home. And these were important people throughout pretty much growing up. Now that I think about it, it's like, wow, how did that happen?
Mhm.
It was because he was a trusted person, because he had built all of the relationships. And everywhere we went, he knew someone. Somebody had known somebody, and we were connecting with someone. But then it was also in the day to day. One of my favorite things to do growing up was to go with him to work. And so he would have this little like Jeep. So I would go in the back and I would beg him, please, 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 I'll just stay quiet in the back. I'll just stay quiet in the back. And so we would travel throughout the province, actually. And one of the things that he had to do was to travel to meet with the traveling gypsy groups through the province and make sure that they basically go through without trouble. So he would be going to them and say, hey, what's happening? Here's the do's and the don'ts. And if any issues, you call me, so that there were merchants that would make things, that would come into town and sell stuff. But then there are also sometimes trouble. So I would go with him. So you have these little tribes of gypsies, and it was pretty scary for someone if you didn't know them and you didn't know. He knew them by first name. They knew who he was. We were welcome there. They would feed us. We would sit down. And I have this image of actually going and sitting down and him talking to the leader of the group, for example. To me, that was relationships.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think seeing my dad in those kind of circumstances, seeing my dad dealing with, we had a lot of people working at the farm, for example, and how he treated everyone. And we would have big cookouts and everybody was invited, and we're all a big family. To me, that influenced me, how I treat people. And there was no one that he would like just ruffle around. Everybody was part of the group. Everybody had a job. He would care about all of the staff and all of the people that worked for us or helped us with things. And those are qualities, those are principles. There was a respect, there was honesty, and also standing up when people weren't, and standing your ground and saying, hey, this is not what you do. And that, I think, shaped me. I think those
And
are qualities.
that, Sylvia, is to my listening of what you're saying. I understand it, but that is integrity in action. And there's no shadow there. And when people know, like I live in this big house and it's way too big and I gotta get rid of it. But the point is that I have a whole lot of people that I've built relationships with over 10 years. And they're roofers and gardeners and yuck, 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 yuck. And I call these guys and they come and they know the answer. And now that we're selling the house and moving, they've actually become over 10 years our friends. They come to our parties. I rely on them. And so they come and they do the work. They won't send me a bill. Okay. They are happy to come and hang out and do this. That's relationship. And it makes me feel so grateful, grateful. And of course, I have also crossed the river of because of my nature and my personality, and I can't change any of those things, okay? I'm hard driving, I'm very stubborn, I'm difficult to manage, I don't want to be told what to do. But I also realized in the last couple of years that I've spent way too much time with people who I really can't be myself with.
Hmm.
And I'm not doing that anymore. Anyway, I'm not ditching you guys.
Thank God.
Well, we know where you live, we know where you're going to live, so
Right,
you can.
right, right.
Yeah. I'll tell you one memory that this trigger talking about my dad. So I have two older brothers, and growing up at the village in the winter, we had sausages and you put them outside, like they dry. right? So my oldest brother was coming home from across the road, and he sees our neighbor's kid across the road had come in, and he was stealing some of the sausages.
Oh no.
So then he went home. So then my brother came running, oh my God, how dare he's stealing and all this stuff, and I'm gonna go and beat him up. So now you have the two brothers where they're all hyped about this. And so my dad listens and listens and listens, and then all I could hear is, "You'll do no such thing. So you go get a sausage right now, put it in a bag, and you're gonna go across the street and you're gonna give it to them."
Wow.
And my brother was like, "No, how dare they? No, I'm not. He stole from us, and how dare he? And blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to tell him." And my dad says, "Nope, you're going to give him a sausage because you know what? He stole because he doesn't have it. And so when you give it to him, he's gonna think about it." He didn't explain that way at the time, but it was
Right.
such a profound lesson for us in a very
Right.
subtle
Right.
and very wise way.
And so
It's about principles.
we got to go back to relating. You don't have to like the other person. You don't even have to agree with them. But if you can sense, if you've paid enough attention
Yeah.
to, are they telling you their truth?
Yeah.
Who are you to tell them they're wrong?
Yeah.
You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to fight with it. You may never talk to them about it again, but you don't have to punish them.
So
Yeah.
it sounds like, Roz, what you're saying is we need to reach out. We
Yeah.
need to reach out to the people who are next to us, across the way from us, even if they don't have the same traditions that we do, even if they
Right.
don't have the same family structure that we do, even if they
Right.
don't have the same jobs that we do.
Right.
We need to reach out,
Yeah.
rebuild
Because
those relationships.
they're still human beings.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You know, silly as it
With lots of
sounds.
potential, right? I mean,
Right.
nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I think I'll be the biggest asshole I possibly can.
Right. No.
Right? I mean, in
Well,
our own ways, we're all
right.
struggling just to
Right.
keep our heads above the water.
Yeah.
They're
About
relationships.
so